Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Gaming Institute, episode number 54 today, with the co-founder of Laguna Games and Crypto Unicorns, Mr. Aron. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy Friday, Ben.
Happy Friday to you, sir. Happy Friday to you. Really excited we get to chat today. I know you have some big things in the works, so really love to just jump in here. Before we get to the present and the future, let's tackle the past for a second. Would love to hear your story of how you really got to where you are today.
Sure. I started my first company in 2009. It was a mobile gaming company. So that was kind of my entrance, like both into the world of software entrepreneurship as well as mobile games. It's kind of very early to that wave. And I basically spent the 10 years after that predominantly in the games industry. Took a brief stint to try to kill Facebook with a social network, and did a health technology platform with appointment booking and telemedicine. But 7 of my 11 years in software entrepreneurship has been in the game space. And on the crypto side, I took a brief look at Bitcoin in 2014 and ignored it. And then, like many people, 2017 was kind of my year, where I went from being very skeptical in January to finally being ready to make an investment at the end of 2017, literally 3 days off the local all-time high. And so crashed out really hard in 2018. Obviously, that extended through 2019. But like I've been telling people, it was very much that period of 2 years where I got comfortable with self-custody. I started connecting my wallet using a bunch of different dApps and even some fun like mini games like Dice to Win and stuff. And I really started to drink the Kool-Aid at that point and feel like I fell very deep down the rabbit hole during those couple of years. So anyway, fast forward to today. Last year, I was able to kind of finally merge my passion for crypto with my day job of building games. And it's been crazy ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the gaming space. What really inspired you to want to get into building games and so on from the get-go? Like, why was that always a draw for you?
The funny story is my mom wouldn't let me play games growing up. She was highly resistant to us having a console. My first console, my grandmother was very tricky. She actually gifted it to my grandfather on Christmas, so my mom couldn't take it away from us. And they set it up in their bedroom. So anytime we go to grandma's, we would get to play predominantly Crash Bandicoot or Spyro, right? It was a PlayStation. So I've always been super passionate about games, in particular on PC, loved strategy games like Alpha Centauri. That was probably the first game that I legitimately fell in love with and played hundreds of hours of. And then, console gaming, you've got Super Smash Brothers and Mario Party on N64. That was like the first console my mom ever let us buy at home. And then going into college, it was Halo 3 and playing with all my friends, playing FPSs and stuff with all my friends. Gaming has always been a huge part of my life, kind of personally. And I had kind of obviously had the entrepreneurial itch very, very young, and saw in particular in 2009 with the release of the Apple App Store that I didn't see. I thought that mobile was going to be really big, and I figured that people would want to play games on mobile. And if I got one thing right, it was certainly that. And then, spent 4 years trying to execute and build games, and learned a lot from 19 to 23. That's a very strange age, I think, to be trying to run a company. So anyway, gaming has been a big part of my life for a long time, for sure.
So when you first saw the potential of mobile, why did you think, "Oh yeah, this is the one. This is the ticket." Like, what about it just clicked for you? Why did you have that intuition?
I think the intimacy of the platform, the fact that you have this computer sitting in your pocket, really changed up the space, the ability to kind of send a push notification to re-engage, and like that's just not possible with console or PC. And it felt like um, a lot of attention was going to go to the mobile platform, given it's attached to your hip, right? And seeing very early on how quickly smartphone usage just exploded and began to consume hours of people's time and attention, it became pretty clear early on that that trend was not going to stop, and for better or for worse, was going to accelerate.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So let's talk about some of the things from the gaming perspective that you learned building for so long outside of Web3 that you think is going to be really important in now the world of crypto gaming and Web3.
Yeah, free to play is a brutal industry, right? You're giving something away for free, and people have to find genuine fun and enjoyment in order to return in the first place, right? So, you don't have the PC or console kind of premium style of, well, I paid $60, like let me see, let me get through the tutorial, let me get through chapter one. Doesn't exist in free to play. People instantly will delete the second they get blocked, or they don't like something. And so I think there's an enormous challenge in onboarding players into a free to play game in a way that shows them the fun as quickly as possible so that they will return. And then you have this crazy thing, which is you gave it away for free. So how do you make money? And that struggle of trying to monetize usually a very small percentage, usually 2% or less of your entire player base, is very interesting. And that leads to effectively trying to build these economies that players will buy into over time, and trying to like manage that over the full life cycle of a game from its kind of growth phase through maturity and kind of the long tail. Tons of great lessons learned that can be applied to this kind of new paradigm of blockchain based games for sure.
Yeah, let's dig into that because one of the things I'm seeing is, and by the way, I love everybody that's going nuts in the chat right now. Shout out to every single one of you. Love that. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be so critical for us to really understand the in-game economies and to really build those in a way that supports the players over an extended period of time, right?
Mhm.
Because I think what we've seen now in the first couple of first couple of innings, I don't even know if we could say multiple innings. We're so freaking early right now, but
Yeah.
in this very early stage, we've seen a lot of really interesting experiments, and a lot of times it's the economy that overall is now where they're feeling a lot of pain. Your in-game currency could be going down and down and down. And as a game project, well, you want to pay your players. You decide to mint more to pay your players, which devalues the currency even more. And it's just like this very vicious cycle. So what things are have you really taken from the economic standpoint? Like how do you fix this problem? Or is this even the biggest problem to fix?
Building a sustainable economy, I would say, is one of the largest and most daunting problems in the space today. I think I said it on the Delphi podcast. Like managing a free to play economy is hard enough, and I think you square the difficulty when you allow players to enter and exit the economy, which is possible in this kind of new paradigm. And we looked at games that are out in the space today and tried to apply kind of best practices from free to play, and in particular the genre that my team and I have kind of the most recent experience with, which is forex strategy mobile games. Those are very high LTV games that are have extremely deep economies, not just vertical depth but like horizontal depth. And so we kind of looked to ensure that kind of crypto unicorns from the beginning would have a very large economy with a ton of depth and breadth. And the idea there is that, listen, you have a lot more levers day one that act as sinks for the primary currencies, both unicorn milk and rainbow tokens, that are valuable features to players, right? That have a heavy incentive to utilize. For example, sinking unicorn milk to produce the crafting materials necessary to upgrade your stable. Why would you do that? Well, you're going to do that because once you've upgraded, you can now put more unicorns on the land, which increases its productive capacity. And so it's not just about putting more sinks in. You have to put sinks in that players are going to be incentivized to utilize and be excited to use, not something that feels like a tax. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned from Forex strategy that we are kind of planning to apply and are leveraging in a kind of our design thinking on how we maintain these economies. And of course, the elephant in the room is also you can't have a player base exclusively playing to earn. It's why I've very much focused on play and earn, which I know is kind of a subtle difference, but I think the distinction is very important. You will absolutely have the ability for whales to pay grinders for their time. That has worked in other games, even games outside of the blockchain space. And so that will be a component of our game. I think it'll be a component of many games. But you need a healthy middle class of players that are coming in genuinely, that enjoy the game, are having fun playing not only the game, but playing with each other. The social components, the social interactivity is very, very important there. And it's why I think in many ways we're bootstrapping not just a game, but kind of a social network that has a game loop at its core. And I think that distinction is really, really important. And it still allows us to incept an economy, and the players who are early will benefit from that, assuming they're willing to kind of put in the work. I think I've said this before, like, we're not looking for people that want to just buy an NFT and have it sit in their wallet and magically it appreciates in value, right? People will have to put work into capitalizing on that, in our game. And I think that is how you build a sustainable kind of long-term economy. I think the last point I could make there is just around specialization. Given there are many different progression avenues for players, you can focus on more. You might really want to focus on berry production. Some players are going to focus on evolutionary and booster materials and try to get the highest tier of those to sell it into the rainbow token marketplace. And all of that, I think, is very important because it forces this idea of specialization within the economy. I actually purposely kind of want it to be so broad that you can't do everything all at once, or you have to join a guild or player DAO where you can coordinate with a bunch of players together to kind of achieve goals and things of that nature. And if that sounds like our real world economy, it's because it's supposed to, right? I think that's the closest comparable to what we now have in this space, where we are building something that is real, that will have tangible value. And again, we have to kind of align incentives towards not just kind of growing very rapidly. Like, yes, that's a part of the first phase, but we've started to think very specifically in like 3 phases: a growth phase, a transition phase, a maturity phase. And how do you manage the economy throughout that in a way that benefits the player community and obviously keeps things kind of on the rails versus what we've seen with some games today.
Okay, I love that answer, and I want to agree with one of the commenters here that's saying, "Work it, uni, work it," because that's amazing. I literally just was writing a piece yesterday about how play to earn is going to die and play and earn is going to be the one to kill it. Because in with this idea of playing to earn, if you just think about the words, like, you're not there for fun, you're there just to earn. And it puts
Yeah.
everything in that scope, and it's really not a good long-term methodology or mindset to take, because then you're actually limiting yourself to a very specific group, and it feels kind of icky, right? But when we switch to the play and earn model, we're opening up a large amount of space that we can then optimize for fun. And when we can optimize for fun and we can earn as part of that, and they're both important, and one's not really defeating the other one, but they're actually enhancing each other. That is going to be the one that's going to, everybody else watch out. Whoever nails that, like, watch out, because that's really going to be a complete game changer. And it sounds like you guys have really started to tap into that and really figure that out. I mean, we can tell definitely the community's going nuts. They're coming out in support.
Yeah, we really have so quickly been able to, I think, bootstrap a pretty phenomenal group of early adopters, and now we're kind of 60 days from ship of the MVP of the game, which will be farming, breeding, and the Rainbow Token Marketplace. So kind of the core um, foundational components of our economy is basically what we're shipping in 60 days. And I think we're already planning a lot of kind of educational material to really focus in on the community of, like, if you're a current holder, you now have a responsibility to help us with this next phase, which is the growth phase, and trying to get people to understand that we're very much all in this together. And if there's ever a situation in which it's community versus Laguna Games, the developer, we've already kind of failed. And so I think it's going to be very, very important as we take the next 60 days to really build up this overall strategy with our own community about how we intend to go from just under 10,000 holders today to hundreds of thousands to, a million. I mean, I would like to be at 1 million plus holders of our NFTs prior to the end of the year. And I think we can achieve that. But again, it's together. That's the crazy thing, is like, players will have the choice of, how they breed, when they choose to trade with other players, et cetera. And it's a very interesting thing that's just certainly never been possible before. And so it's going to be really exciting to kind of see how it plays out. And I got accused the other day of being coming off too confident. Part of that is just, years of being an entrepreneur and making a ton of mistakes. And having kind of the best team I've ever worked with. So there is some underlying confidence there. But in many of the designs or how we're thinking about not only the economy, but the game design, is we're putting enough levers in that we feel like we can balance and tune it over time as we get real data. And that, to me, is kind of the key. It's not about having this silver bullet or this plan that, we're just checking off boxes. It's much more about, like, can we build an adaptive system that we can change and, to a certain extent, upgrade and evolve over time. I think that's going to be really, really important. And again, we need to do that in tandem with our community of players.
That's a fantastic idea. So, if I'm understanding correctly, basically you want to build the core in a way to where you can kind of adjust and rebalance in a lot of different ways, so that you don't necessarily have to nail every part of, I'm thinking like a fighting game, like a League of Legends. There are character rebalances and nerfs and buffs and stuff all the time. So it seems like you guys are building in a way to where you have a lot of flexibility about how you then do things in the future. That's a fascinating idea. How did you actually pull that off? How did you build that?
A lot of sinks and a lot of sources is the simple answer. It's ensuring, when I say like a lever, generally I just mean like a feature that's either a source or a sink, right? And I think the challenge that we've seen in Axie is you have several sources, several features that act as sources. I know as of yesterday, several of those got nerfed. But you only have this one sink lever being breeding. And so day one, the crypto unicorns economy has both breeding and evolution. So we just kind of like right off the bat doubled the amount of sinks. If people think there's only going to be one evolution too, right? Like obviously there's a very cool progression path there that can also uh, again be valuable to go down, right? To invest in. And again, it's having additional sinks beyond that in crafting of materials for the progression of your buildings on the farm and land, as well as, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the like the unlock of new land, right? So this is going to get announced later today, but I'll leak a little alpha here, which is we have kind of we originally called it the land deed system. I'm very much tired of selling land in these like pre-sales. It's always a mess. You're fighting bots. Some people want whitelist, some people don't. It's just a mess. What we are shooting for is to effectively allow landowners to craft a keystone item, which allows you to effectively go to a vending machine to purchase a plot of land. And of course, there would be different keystones for each type of common land, the 3 types of rare and mythic. And of course, a mythic keystone is going to be very hard to craft. And then the idea is the vending machine just slowly increments price. So there's kind of this incentive to do that a little bit earlier. And again, that will consume a lot of unicorn milk, potentially rainbow tokens and things, and acts as I think, a feature that has a sink that people are very much willing to utilize because it, helps them progress and add new land to the economy and stuff. And so, again, I don't think we have a silver bullet at all. And we're basically leaning into the idea that, hey, this system needs to be adaptable, and we have to lean into the complexity and just make sure that there's enough levers to ensure balance over time. And again, that'll be a process that we work with in tandem, in tandem with our community on.
That's fascinating. Do you think that that's going to become the norm for crypto games moving forward, or do you think it's going to take? So, one, do you think that will become the norm, and then two, how long do you? Let's say it is the right move, for the majority of games. How long do you think it's going to take for people to realize that and start to flock there?
I guess we'll see how our experiment goes, right? That is one thing about the space is the data is out there for any games that are launched. I find that fascinating. I think a lot of traditional gaming companies are probably very hesitant to enter the space and operate so openly. But when you think about it, it is similar to open source software. And you just look at the Ethereum ecosystem as a really good example of when you do operate more openly, the space collectively moves a lot quicker because you can look at ideas that are working and potentially implement them, copy pasta, right? Or make a tweak that better fits the experience that you're trying to build. So I think you can take the approach of, excuse me, you can take the approach of being like very concerned about that. And this idea, this like Web 2 boomer idea of like, no, everything has to be internal. We don't want to share this stuff out. And I think as a company, we're leaning into, the more open route here. And so I do think over time, if what we're doing is working, you'll see a lot of people move in this direction. I think companies are already moving in this direction that are out and deployed. I have no doubt Sky Mavis is doing that. I have no doubt that the makers of Tate and Arena are doing that. And again, I think it's beneficial for everyone to be running these experiments, and we all kind of see what works, and it helps us improve our experiences, right? And the ultimate differentiator is going to be community and the IP, and again, the game and finding the fun, and not necessarily like, oh, this economic loop is just perfect and it can just be reapplied everywhere. Like, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't even necessarily thinking like this one particular like they're just trying to take all of your sinks and sources and whatnot, but more of just the idea of, to me, it's almost like eh, multiple interchangeable parts where you can kind of like, you have your big machine and then you can kind of take a piece off, tinker with it, and then put it back on and see if that makes it better or makes it worse. And then, you kind of doing it that way, and more of like a kind of building it in that way. I personally think it is going to go towards that, because what that also does is it gives you the ability to almost at some point go hands off and let the community decide how things happen from there. And then you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from a game that can operate completely driven by the community, where it could be
Yes.
like, and then it can, and the implications of that is that it can live on forever beyond the founders and beyond, the original core team, if it's set up in the right way. Is that something that you guys are thinking about, or like, how do you view that idea?
It's core to our kind of mission and vision for what we're doing here. I think the thing that's interesting, like looking back at some of the free to play days, is we had a few early. We built a game called Battle Strike Force, had Sylvester Stallone as the face of it. It was a 4X strategy mobile game. And very early on, we got some players who came in, one in particular who sent a very kind of nasty, frustrated support email in. And I had asked the person doing support for us if anyone ever got real nasty to just send them up to me and I would respond. And you learn very quickly, like people generally just want to be heard. And after he actually became one of our most loyal players. And he played the game an hour plus every day for nearly 2 years in a row, and
Wow.
like barely missed a day. And I look back on that time, and he would occasionally send in suggestions and stuff, many of which we implemented in things. And the really cool thing about the space today, if done right, and I have to give full credit to our phenomenal community team at Laguna, and all the incredible mods and stuff that have come on board, is I think we are actively shaping a group of people that predominantly are here for the long term and very interested in like building this together. And again, there's, coming out of free to play, coming out of traditional gaming, it's very weird. It's, you have the players on the other side of the fence from the developer. And we're very much like, no, come on in, like join us on this side and let's like work together. And the token side of things gives us this phenomenal alignment of incentives that we've just never had before. And then you push in all the additional transparency, the data being on chain, the immutability of the NFT assets outside of when a player selects, like, hey, I want to upgrade or evolve, right? And it's very much in their control on when changes are made to their NFTs. I just think that that's something that you really ought to be able to grow a much larger pie, even if we, the developer, have a smaller slice. And I think the reality is like that slice is going to be much, much bigger than free to play, because free to play is just brutal. You're trying to extract as much value out of a couple percent of the paying players as possible. Those players have zero say over what is happening in a game that in some cases, particularly 4X strategy, they're investing very heavily in. And yeah, I really think there's a phenomenal opportunity on the other side of all of this kind of experimentation.
Absolutely. One of the things that kind of pops to my mind is when you're thinking about this experimentation and you're inviting the player base onto your side of the fence, and then you're destroying the fence. There's no more fence here.
Yeah.
Uh, there are a lot of things within the game itself that, as a non-technical person, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how 70,000 developers come in and like everybody's tweaking things, writing code, and how that then moves over to the game. Like, it's amazing to me the things that really people who are much smarter than myself are able to do. If I'm then helping to make decisions that other people have to execute on, and I don't fully understand what that takes, that could cause a little bit of tension, because on the development side, like, there is a certain amount of time required to execute on things. There are certain limits to what technology can do in this, at this moment, not in the grand scheme, but in the very moment that you want something, the
Yeah.
technology can only do so. So how do you balance this idea of absolutely we want community in, absolutely we want community to be driving a lot of decisions, at the same time the devs have to execute and the devs actually know what's possible to execute, and so there's inherently probably maybe a little bit of tension, not because anybody's angry at each other, but because there might be just some lack of information there, or understanding of how things are going to work under the hood or could be implemented.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically telling me my own day job, right? Which is, as product owner, I want everything, and there's only a certain amount of time in the day for our engineering team. And so it is a constant kind of um, push and pull. And I would like to think I do a halfway decent job of setting semi um, achievable goals once I'm told what the actual timeline around a feature, is. And so as far as involving the community, it is a process. It will be steps that we kind of take over time. I think where it starts, one of the clearest ideas that I have in my head post the release of the governance dashboard is to effectively do a hackathon where we invite other developers to build a loop, a game loop that would incorporate our assets. And we would let the community vote to determine the winner, and that winner would get a grant out of the ecosystem fund to develop that game. And they would develop it in tandem with Laguna, almost as a publisher, so that it's fully incorporated into the actual economy that we're all building. The developer has this alignment of incentives in that their grant is in our governance token. And I think that's a really good first step, where you start to let the community vote on what are the next arcade games that we add to the arcade. I think we are a long way from, here's all the meta changes we want to make, right? And let's put that up to vote. I think I've said this before. I like the idea of the community electing like game masters, if you will. And right now that's Jeff Witt, our design director. And the hope is that he continues to perform, and the community continues to be in support of him being the game master and us being kind of the game maker. And I think over time, we are looking into ideas around like building like a council of corns that would have key members of the community kind of join, so that they can be the more on the ground voice of the community in our roadmap discussions and stuff. And so anyway, I want to almost replace myself first as product owner and the person who owns the strategic roadmap with the community. And so I think early on, a lot of the proposals are going to be written by me, in basically saying, here's what I want to do. What do y'all think? And if it gets voted down, great. We'll kind of keep iterating on that front. And over time, yes, the desire is to continue to decentralize. And that starts with onboarding other developers, right? Some companies really lean into this idea of decentralization in the space, but they do not have the tech and tools that are actually going to allow another developer to come on and build. And we have a very robust tech stack we acquired from the predecessor company many of us were already at. And in many ways, there's kind of an unfair advantage for us there, because we've had other developers that have already onboarded to our tech and tools and are building other games. And so that tells me, above and beyond, especially a company starting now, entering the space, like it's going to take forever before you have like documentation and external developers somewhere else in the world can like ingest and begin to build on top of. And so just about any Unity developer in the world will be able to plug into our backend, which of course would include all the blockchain interconnectivity, get them directly integrated into our economy and things like that. So
that is a game changer.
That's the hope. My co-founder and CTO, Steven, he always kind of waffled between wanting to be a tech and tools company and a content developer, because content is very hard to get right. You have to build something fun, right? Nothing has changed about gaming, even though we have these new tools in our toolbox. And so anyway, yes, I do think it's one way that we can differentiate and really succeed, is again by onboarding other developers so that we can effectively get content out to the community quicker.
That's incredible. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're not only building out the playground for all of the games to play in with the different toolkits and the basically building an ecosystem, but then you're also gonna help to fund the next ideas for the games on the playground, and then your dev team is going to work with them to make sure it all fits nicely within the existing ecosystem, and then you're going to help push that out and publish that. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's what we just did with Dark Forest, which launched a week ago, right? That was with Moonstream. Huge shout out to that team. They do on-chain analytics. They're phenomenal. And yeah, we basically collaborated on the idea. Again, I had this crazy spec that got trimmed down, and we got what we got. I think it's it's working out great. But yeah, that was collaborating with them and specifically working together to map out the economy of this kind of mini game. And yeah, we plan to run many more on-chain mini games in addition to the Unity-based WebGL, iOS, and Android experience. And yeah, I think it's a really good template for how we plan to collaborate with others in the future.
That's incredible. So let's talk a little bit about the future. I know we've been talking about it some, but I really want to kind of understand, scoping out a little bit, what your thoughts are on the future of crypto gaming, the future of the metaverse, and specifically, and we touched on a couple of them just by virtue of understanding how you're approaching some of these ideas, but what do we really need to do from here to grow? What are some of the biggest obstacles we're facing as an industry, and how do you think we'd really solve those?
The tough questions now. I think generally we need to find our first sustainable economy, right? We're just too early to know with any game that's launched, like what's
Sure.
working and what's not. I think we are seeing some cracks at the seams with certain economies. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I think, a continued learning experience. I think us as a company, we wanted to focus on the more crypto native crowd to begin with. I looked at that and said, and this comes from Forex strategy, which is like a genre that with 10 million DAO generates nearly as much as match three with 100 million plus DAO, right? And so I looked at, call it 10 million MetaMask wallets that are doing the majority of transaction volume in NFTs. And I said, that's the audience. That's where we start. And I think personally, I'm taking the bet, just generally being a believer in the crypto space. And I do believe over time, more and more people will have wallets in their hands. And I believe the wallet user experience is probably one of the biggest barriers to onboarding the next, what are we at? Like maybe 150 million crypto wallets, which I think includes custodial and non-custodial, right? And you're seeing all the diagrams of like, hey, here's how we get to 1 billion, and we're like on track with internet growth. Like if that continues, it's like this should be really obvious to people. Like,
Right.
and I just make that point to say we'll grow as new people onboard into the crypto space. Like to me, that is the path for us, because the second you begin to own your own identity and data via custodial or non-custodial, self-custodial wallet, I think for me that was the light bulb moment. I just genuinely think that people want to own their own identity and data, and that would include assets that they're buying in games. And so I think I said this in the Delphi podcast, but I'm kind of taking a bet that NFT gaming eats free to play. I just don't see how free to play survives long term when all things being equal, why not own the things that you're buying, right? And how we transition though to a kind of more mature market is it probably looks a lot more like crypto unicorns 4 or 5 years from now. Like the barrier to entry has to come down, and it has to be like I always refer to like buying a Pokemon card pack, right? But at that point, we have hopefully 100 million people playing this game, right? And so,
Right.
yes, the barrier to entry has come down, but the treasury is massive. We have this huge IP. Everybody's walking around with their unicorn on a T-shirt and making friends on the street, right? Because they've, they have this instant connection being tied to this shared kind of IP. So like that's where it goes, and anyone who's early benefits from that, right? Assuming they put in the work to get us there. And that's the key. And I think how we continue to hopefully align incentives and stuff. So it's just, 2009 was a crazy time because I was trying to, like at the time, I was trying to convince Flash game developers and Facebook Canvas developers to license their titles to me. Because my initial business was like, I love games, but I don't really know how to build games. Let me license an existing game that's fun on Flash and I'll port it to mobile. And that was actually a struggle. People did not think that mobile, was going to be a big thing at all. I just find that funny. And then you also had like all this NFT hate. I just laugh at because it's identical to the free to play hate. And you can go back and look at articles in Gama Sutra and things where these tried and true games programmers, even people internal to the industry, were writing these diatribes on free to play and just hating on it. And again, it's now pretty much the largest revenue driver for all of gaming. And I
think significantly too.
Yeah, exactly. I think free to play may even be getting big enough to be larger than film and TV. Somebody in chat can tell me if I'm wrong about that or not. But it's free to play was a phenomenal distribution mechanism, right? But like I was taught in my high school economics class, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So people onboard into the experience very, very quickly, but there is a misalignment of incentives between the developer and the player in that paradigm. But if you take a positive spin on it, you can look at that massive, industry, which is approaching $100 billion annually, I think just on mobile. You can see that people were willing to spend $100 billion annually because they were getting entertainment value out of these experiences. And that's 1% to 2% of the player base. I'm taking the bet that when players have ownership, a much larger chunk of the player base, is willing to play. And of course, we flipped the script. 100% of our holders right now have paid for that, for that entry. I do think over time there will be ways to also onboard people via free-to-play kind of distribution model and things. But again, I would honestly rather get to the point where over time, we got 100 million people in this game. People are buying $10, Pokemon card packs, right? And oh my God, I just got a triple mythic or, or quad mythic or an epic right. And so I think that's where it goes. It'll be a bit of a transition from the kind of speculative madness that we have now. But again, I think we've built and are continuing to build a community of people that largely get that and are ready to collectively kind of help us get there.
So if I'm hearing correctly, and I've never thought about it with these numbers before, exactly like you just laid it out, but if 1% to 2%, let's say 1% of free to play, the 1% of players are driving $100 billion a year in revenue, and they get no ability to like store that value and then to respend that. And now they have an opportunity to take that 100 billion and buy something that they can not only still enjoy in the exact same way they did before, but now it retains value of some sort.
Yes.
And that's only
like
1%.
A massive opportunity, doesn't it?
That's only 1% of the player base. And then once everybody realizes
2 to 3% across all games is the kind of industry standard metric. But yeah, I mean,
that's
I think the pie gets a lot bigger if it's 100 billion a year with 2 to 3%, and now you actually own the things in a game. Like that's crazy. But I think a lot of the negative reaction to NFTs is probably around this idea of like, I don't want to pay $10,000 for a game that I would pay $60. And it's like, no. You can still come in and play Call of Duty Warzone. You just may not have the crazy fucking diamond skin that Nick Merckx originally had and then sold to a player, and then it got sold and sold and sold and sold. And when the guy shows up in the dragon skin armor, you usually run, right? Because it's like a really good player. Like, so again, I think a lot of the NFT hate is more around the barrier to entry. And I'm like, long term, what happens is probably the unit price per NFT goes down, but there's obviously a lot more players buying in. And through the progression, like I took an asset, piece of land, I got up to level 10. Like I put in the work, proof of work, and I was able to then, trade that with another player that wanted to start at level 10 and not at level 0 or level 1. And I think that's where it heads. And there's probably a little bit of a bumpy transition as we move from kind of this speculative era. It was one of the reasons beyond Ethereum mainnet gas fees to just kind of get onto Polygon. Like we've been the #1 game on Polygon in terms of volume over the last month, beating out Zed Run and Avogacci and a few other really, and they're launched, right? And so I think we have a lot of potential. I've had this moment where I'm like, man, our collection value, I think, just crossed $90 million as of yesterday. And I thought, what would that be on Ethereum mainnet? But you think about that for a second, you're like, I never wanted people paying hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars for a transaction. It's not sustainable to be there, right? And
That's right.
Despite the friction in bridging up, which is lowering every day as Polygon continues to add various methods to bridge, especially the L2 to L2 bridges, those are very sweet now. I'm very happy with the decision that we made to kind of launch within that ecosystem and to a certain extent kind of grow a little bit slower and stay away from some of the kind of just pure speculative madness that I think can kill projects that get a bit ahead of themselves.
Absolutely. So I just want to give a PSA out there. Remember, kids, when you see the guy in the dragon armor, you run away because he's coming for your lunch. He's gonna eat it. But yeah, I absolutely love. I love the way you're thinking about it and framing this. And what's cool to me is by going on to an L2 scaling solution like Polygon, what that says to me and what everybody listening and playing should take from that is that you are in it for the long term, because that's a long-term decision. Like there's no reason not to do that if you really think about it. Like wherever the transactions, the ability to do a lot of transactions very cheaply, which is what a game requires, and then all the other things that come with the game, like the NFTs and the tokens, and that is where we have to build to allow people to really enjoy it in the way that they should be able to enjoy it. And so if you don't see your favorite game moving in a direction to make it better for you, like think about that and think about what that means. So the fact that you guys are already doing that to me is really awesome. And that's really interesting. How did you decide on Polygon versus either an alternative L1 or an alternative L2, or even creating your own application level chain? That narrative's getting a little bit of heat lately. So like, how did you actually make that decision, and first on what type of solution, and then the specific solution within that type?
Yeah, we made this decision. This would have been September, right? So, like anything, we took a bit of a bet on the Polygon ecosystem. And I like to explain why, because I believe, ultimately, I think I made the bet because I felt Polygon would give us the most flexibility over time. So, the first thing I love about Polygon is it's kind of Cosmos built on top of Ethereum. Like if you go through their docs, they really did start with Cosmos and Tendermint and all of this stuff, and this idea of building an internet of blockchains. But instead of being a competitive L1, they chose to build on top of Ethereum. And I think that was the first very key, very important, and I think we're seeing that play out in the growth of their ecosystem, that was a successful decision, right? It is EVM compatible from day one. Any Solidity code that works on Ethereum mainnet will work on Polygon, right? And so that first step, I think, is really important, choosing not to be competitive, but actually embrace Ethereum and try to scale it. And then obviously we're on the proof of stake network now. But what I loved about Polygon, and I mean, again, it was a bit of a bet, and now they've really delivered, is they're leaning into ZK rollups very, very hardcore. They have several, whether it's Polygon Zero, Polygon Maiden, Polygon Hermes, which they acquired, right? Each of those are a different flavor of ZK rollup that is directly interoperable with the proof of stake network. So over time, we actually have the choice of expanding off to one of the EVM compatible ZK rollup solutions that they're doing. And again, I find that really compelling as a scaling solution, because I think zero knowledge proofs are the future of the space. I see some people over there wanting us on Avalanche, like no hate against the Avalanche ecosystem. I think a ZK rollup or bust is probably the right way to scale. And we also even have the option of using Polygon Edge, which used to be called Polygon SDK, which would be an application-specific sidechain if we really wanted to go the kind of like Ronin route. And so again, I wanted optionality, and the Polygon ecosystem absolutely gave us that. And so we'll continue to see how it plays out. But so far, you just look at the other developers that are coming over. It's very clear many people are kind of seeing the benefits of this ecosystem. And again, the choices, the fact that it is on Ethereum, and the fact that I can move to a zero knowledge proof rollup over time, that's pretty special. And again, preserves optionality for us as a developer. And that was super, super important. And I think a lot of the other solutions, you're really kind of getting locked in, and that can be very, very dangerous. I think we'll have an internet of blockchains that are really supported by a few L1s over time. And again, that just came from years of spending time in the space. And I had been using Polygon personally for some of my own like crypto degen fund stuff. And yeah, pretty confident in the decision that we made. And again, a lot of options as the market shifts that I think are great.
Love it. Love it. And yeah, I absolutely love everything that Polygon's doing. Actually had the head of Polygon Studios on not too long ago. And then, just a couple other, the interview guests are also just totally crushing it on Polygon too. Actually had one of the co-creators of Zed Run, and some of the gents from Decentral Games as well. So those are, you're all some of my, my favorite projects of all time. And seems like a lot of smart people are choosing Polygon for a reason. So
I mean, there's yeah, it's tough. It was a weird thing to try and make that important of a decision very early on. And again, chose it for the optionality. Shout out to the Meta protocol too. That is a very interesting L1 based on zero knowledge schnarks. So yeah, that's a fascinating one. I love this chat feature. The live chat feature is legit. This is actually the first I've done with a live chat feature, I think.
Okay, well, let's lean into that. Maybe you could give us. So I want to open it up for some Q&A then. Chat, if you guys and gals have any questions, or robots, whatever you are, all are welcome. There's some questions in the chat here. If they're quality questions and not just ridiculousness, then I will definitely encourage Aaron to answer those. But in the meantime, while the questions are rolling in, because there's a little bit of a delay, maybe you could give us a little bit of hopium for the future. I know you've been giving us a lot because there's a ton, but just a little bit more. What are you kind of most excited about for the future, and really like the biggest piece of hope that you have for for all this?
Just generally in the crypto space at large.
Yeah, crypto gaming, the metaverse, the fun things we play in.
I think for me, it really does come back to this idea of, once you've self-custodied in a wallet, you own your identity and data. And I think you start with that very basic primitive, in which I worked at a health technology startup very briefly before diving back into games, called Human API. And the founder of that company had a thing where they were trying to solve interoperability of health data, right? Which is a fucking nightmare. That is like the worst possible. If you want to just understand how like Web 2, you just have all these disparate databases that have no ability to talk to each other. So you have to build these interoperability bridges that usually don't work great and are a mess. And EHR health data transfer is like the worst possible, I think, place to do that. Because you also have like, anyway, a lot of EHRs, a lot of different database flavors. It's a mess. But he used to say this thing that really stuck with me. I think it's applicable to the crypto space, which is the patient is the only node that traverses the entire network, and that you're the one interacting with insurance. You go to this doctor, you go to this doctor, you go to this doctor. It's the same in Web3 with a crypto wallet, right? It gives you the ability as the node to traverse the network, controlling your identity and data. And I just think that that is so fundamentally, it's just like a positive paradigm shift, where we each can be in control of our own identity and data, choose who we interact with, choose the dApps that we interact with. And I think that, and then, so that's blockchain just gives you that, right? And this idea of public key cryptography gives you that. And then Satoshi through Bitcoin kind of gave the ability for whatever they say, right? Internet native money. And that in combination with identity and data ownership is crazy once you put the wallet there. And I think that the hopium here is, I just think that's a fundamentally better paradigm for us as human beings to like transact and interact and share together. And I think collectively, if we can keep that trend of 150 to a billion, like let's get to a billion, let's get to 3, let's get to 6 billion people that have that, I think it'll be a better world for all of us, for sure. Setting aside gaming, setting aside all the applications, I just think those primitives are better for all of us, and is something that I'm super excited about. And I think gaming is a great vessel to onboard people into this new paradigm. And so I think we said this in the first white paper. I kept it in the second one, second version. We want to onboard millions of people to this space through games. And that would make me super happy and fulfilled for sure.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so we had some questions rolling in. I think you can see that on your side. Whichever ones you want to tackle, go for it. I'll kind of leave that up to your
All right,
discretion.
we'll go down the list. We'll do a little rapid fire. So Win Moon asks, when you describe the tokenomics of Unim, I'm hoping it won't be a hyperinflationary token like SLP. So yes, correct. We've seen the challenges with SLP. One of the huge challenges is that the amount of SLP that was being minted scaled linearly with new players, and that's a huge problem. So we are not doing that, which does mean it'll be a little harder to get unicorn milk than coming in, logging in, pressing some buttons, right? We force active choices and decisions to also combat bots and create scenarios where there's like a human in the loop needed to make a decision. And then I've been talking about syncs. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but putting a lot of meaningful, valuable syncs into the economy is super, super important. And another way that will keep a tight control on, you basically just want the spread between mint and burn to be almost 1-to-1. You don't want it to be 1-to-1, otherwise there's no float, but very close to 1-to-1, and certainly not scaling over time. So again, no silver bullet, but I think we've designed enough levers to be able to balance that over time. Scholarship renting system. Yes, I cannot promise it day one because the engineering team is slammed, and we're trying to go a route a delegation model where you can effectively delegate your assets to another account, a player who can then play, and the tokens are effectively split when they sync the wallet and stuff. And there's ways to make that far more trustless, I think, than some of the models that we've seen, and just reduce the operational overhead for managers who are having to like make direct payments to scholars. So we're trying to automate all that. I would rather do it right and have it ship slightly after the game launch than try to push forward some simpler solution that creates a lot of management overhead. Let's see here.
There's one funny one while you're looking at them saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
mom, can we have the breeding talk?"
Oh gosh. Everybody kind of, yeah, exactly. I don't know what happens in the nursery. I think we're going to not reveal that, that side of things. Um, More information on breeding, that's pretty easy. You take any two unicorns, you can breed them together. It takes normal berries, two unicorns, unicorn milk, a little bit of rainbow tokens. You have the option of adding class berries. So if you have two unicorns of two different classes and you really want a certain class, let's say crystal, you can actually apply crystal berries instead of normal berries. And if you apply enough, you effectively get a guarantee of the class that you want out of that breed. And unicorns start as eggs, and then after a 24-hour period can be hatched into babies. And there's, I forget exactly what the cooldown is. It's pretty short, and then they can be evolved into adults. So that's kind of the breeding system.
Love it. And hey, I know we're going pretty over time here, so maybe if you want to do one or two more, and then I'll shout out some names just so everybody gets some love here.
Sure. Let's see. You're going to need a unicorn pretty much to earn unicorn milk. There may be ways that you get some, but it'll be very, very small. What you can do without a unicorn day one is plant seeds and start to harvest berries, which gets you prepared. But you very much, it's a unicorn game, right? So again, we didn't want to limit players that came in later and only have land. On my side, I'm going to be running a big breeding operation, just trading out to try and get as many new players into the game, and particularly landowners. We were joking about wanting to set up a system that would let people with land without corns, like say, "Hey, I'm willing to buy, this many," and you could basically, socially say, "All right, yeah, I'll start to supply, supply you unicorns and things like that." But the ability to get unicorn milk without unicorns is going to be pretty limited. It won't be zero, but it'll be pretty limited.
Makes sense. Okay, everybody, I just want to do a quick shout out. Monetish, Chananyu, G Melody, Edwin, Win again, Monetish, NFTR, Pathampong, Dan, Win, Douglas, Bearvik, Bulvik, GPU Hog, Dan, Yeezy, all the people, Lil Devi, Anton. Thank
Didn't
you
realize
all.
Tanya was in here.
And Chicago Spartan, got you in the house. And Victoria, Yeezus again. And I can't pronounce the very first one that came in. So anyways, thank you all so much for sticking around with us today. Wendy, we see you too. Love all of you so much. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know you're a busy man doing some amazing things. So thank you very much for coming to chat.
I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're the